It's the small things in a relationship that really matter in the long run, and it's one of the things that people can have the most control over. And there's some things where you have to go against your natural instinct or your intuition and say, I need this, and I know this is good for me, even though it's not intuitive for me to go after this.
So just some background, just some context and color. Ty was one of my first professors in university, and I told you the story the other day, but you hadn't heard it. And I think it's good just to frame context around how human Ty is, how vulnerable, and to me how much strength that has. When I went out to university, I was getting recruited for a program, and Ty was helping lead it, and he gave this 2-hour monologue. I don't know where you went. It was like absurd, and it was hilarious, and it was embarrassing, and at the end of it, you could tell that Ty, it meant so much to Ty that he cried. And the reason I bring that up is the first time I'd ever seen a man cry and saw it as strength. And that moment with you, even though I wasn't with you, I was in the room with you, made me a better person. And so I don't want to put too much pressure on tonight.
I know, I gotta.
I think we have the chance in 20 minutes to get to know you a little bit better and in turn become better versions of ourselves.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
So
the pressure. Yeah.
So Ty, where do we start? So here's a question I'm really curious about. It was actually, so my girlfriend, Leticia, asked me this. I said, hey, Ty's coming out. He wrote the book on like the science of happily ever after. He's an expert on long-term relationships. And she said, well, is he in a relationship? Is he married? Yeah. I said, I don't think so.
I highly doubt it.
Let's go awkward.
Right.
So no, what I really want to know is you know the science of long-term relationships. Right. Why do you think you found yourself where you're at today in terms of a romantic relationship?
Alone, yeah.
Wow.
We're going towards the awkward.
I know. Dove right in there, man.
We only have 20 minutes. We gotta go deep. Yeah.
So I'm in graduate school, and one of the first things that happens in graduate school is you get exhaustively tested in psychology. So it's like 8 hours of psychological testing, and then you get back all this data about your strengths and weaknesses. So it's pretty unusual. And then graduate school starts, and you start to learn all this stuff about yourself. And so I'm reading through hundreds of studies about romantic relationships and how traits predict happiness or stability. There's even studies that show how traits predict when you'll marry or if you'll marry.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm diving into this data. It's really good data, really good studies. And I'm kind of adding up the traits in the regression, and I'm like, it's kind of like when a neurologist has a neurological condition, and they're like, I'm experiencing the thing I studied, right? And so I went home and got on a bus, went back home, and I look at my testing data, and I was like, man, I was like, I've got it. So I've got these traits. And it's not an excuse, but it's just it was actually illuminating for me. Like my novelty seeking, for example, which we discussed this morning. That's a great trait for me in some situations. So if it comes to taking a risk with pursuing a new idea, for example, or maybe having the stubbornness or persistence with something I can't quite figure out, it's a real strength in those situations. But I think in relationships, I realize, boy, it makes it really tough, actually there. And it's interesting. I think that I'm finally ready to be in a relationship, but it took me a lot longer, actually, to get to that place. But I'm happy in the long run, because I think if I had done it at an age-appropriate time, then I wouldn't have been ready, actually. Yeah. So now I'm all dressed up. And Right.
So before we talk about kind of the other person in a relationship that you're seeing out, how important is self-awareness to a healthy relationship?
Yeah, it's a little bit of this inverted U kind of thing, right? Where too little self-awareness is a bad thing. But also too much, I think, can be bad as well, because you have some people who are ruminative or obsessive about things, and that just generates so much self-doubt and anxiety that that's not good either. But there is this good kind of middle point where you do want to be self-reflective, and there's a lot of nice data now coming into psychology from a more Eastern kind of philosophy that is kind of mindfulness-based and just suggests that if on a daily basis you're attentive to the small things in a relationship. I'm huge on this, actually. It's the small things in a relationship that really matter in the long run, and it's one of the things that people can have the most control over. And not only the things that you do for a partner or for the relationship, but also the act of being mindful and noticing and being grateful and appreciating what somebody else does. I can give you a quick example.
Please,
So in studies of bereavement of happily married couples, so someone's been happily married 40, 50, 60 years and now they're bereaved. Researchers will ask, so what is it that you miss about your relationship or your partner? And it's never the big ticket kinds of things, you know. I miss all the exciting trips to overseas or whatever. They'll say, I miss the tiny things that we did together that were habits and that were ours. One of the most heartbreaking ones still to me to this day is this older gentleman who said, I miss that she was the only one that knew that I took 2 lumps of sugar in my coffee. You know, I miss driving into work together. I miss the walks around the lake after work. That's the great stuff in romantic relationships, in our friendships, in our work relationships. But it's so easy, I think, to lose track of those, you know, and to take those things for granted. So if I had one piece of advice for people, that's the main thing.
So how do we kind of, I guess, flex or develop that muscle when your life doesn't have a regular rhythm? So a lot of the entrepreneurs here, they might be traveling 60, 70, sometimes 80% of the time, but they have a relationship and they're in a long-term relationship and they're truly in love and they want to show those small things. Are there ways to do that without having to do it every single day?
Yeah, right. You know, I think one of the things that's helpful sometimes with people who travel a lot is some sort of journaling, and that can be really creative now, I think, with technology. The simple act of taking a picture of something that was meaningful to you or interesting to you, that actually holds value for your partner, that you were thoughtful enough, one, to capture that, and then also to catalog it in some sort of way. You don't have to send it that day, but some people keep a photo album that they automatically upload to, and that's really nice for somebody to be able to see that kind of thing. Some people still write old school letters or postcards. It's so awesome when you get actual mail, right? That's personal, so that's another great thing you can do. But, you know, one of the things that we find, of course, is there's quantity and there's quality. And I know this sounds common sense in hindsight, but even the best of us can lose track of being mindful about the quality we give when we do have face-to-face time. I think for busy people, for ambitious people, charged up people, one of the biggest things is learning how to create some sort of space and separation between the time that you're charged up and worked up for your professional life and when you switch over to your personal life. So when you do get the chance to be face-to-face, how do you build in that buffer to make that transition?
So if you have a girlfriend now.
Yes, yeah. Ooh. Yeah, so. I'm trying, man. Yeah.
So, and we don't have to publish this if you don't want, but are you taking your own advice? Like in seeking out this relationship? Did you say, does she have these 3 qualities? Yes, this is a smart decision long term. Or did you go all romantic on us?
That's a tough line there. So I do try to take, you know, my own advice. One of the things I guess that I try to do in my work in general is I really try to stay away from telling people what they should do. You know, in self-help, I think it's really interesting because, you know, who likes to be told what to do? You know, and I don't think anybody really does. I think with your romantic relationships, you really don't like to be told what to do, right? And one of the goals with the tone of the first book about the science of happily ever after was just to provide good information and be like, hey, this is what we know at this point. This is our best information available. You can take it and decide what you want to do with it based on your situation. And that means sometimes that people have to custom tailor things. Yeah. But yeah, it actually really helped me out a lot in that way. And there's some things where you have to go against your natural instinct or your intuition and say, I need this, and I know this is good for me, even though it's not intuitive for me to go after this.
Yeah, well, what can you share with us some of those things that we intuitively tend to get wrong when we think about a long-term relationship?
Sure. You know, the top two would be looks and money. Yeah. And it's not that you should get somebody who's bad looking, you know, or that you're not attracted to. And it's not that money's not important at all. But it's just that people try to maximize too much on those two variables, right? But as we talked about this morning, the return on investment from those is really pretty small, if not poor, right? So I think I like to have this approach-oriented philosophy with psychology in general, where it's like, what's the good stuff out there? Yeah. And how do I orient myself in a way that I'm really hungry for the good stuff? Because what you find is when people are going after good stuff, they kind of tend to stay away from the bad stuff or their bad habits.
Can you tell us, you touched on it this morning, but what are those things that we should really be looking for?
Right. The good news is there's a lot of things that can be good, right? One of the things I like to focus on is personality. So if I took the best three wishes there are emotional stability, agreeableness or kindness, right? Kind of the same thing, and novelty seeking that's not too high. Okay, so you don't even have to get somebody who's low, just don't get it too high, right? And if you get those three things, you go from a downward trajectory in satisfaction across, 7, 14 years to a trajectory that looks a little bit more like this, which is really great. So you go from a 33% chance of having a happily ever after to potentially an 85, 88% chance of having a happily ever after just by making a few tweaks. Yeah.
So maybe switching into what you seem to be really passionate about now. Can you share with us what's occupying your headspace now? What's getting you most curious?
Social awkwardness. Dan is like on my mind at all times. So, in life, in my personal life and professional life, so we had choice after book one. So we could stay on the relationship route, and that's financially probably the better decision. Yeah. Just because you have a bigger platform there. But then you're at risk of getting pigeonholed. So I talked to my agent, and she's like, you're kind of weird, so why don't you do something different? I was like, oh, all right. So she's like, well, we want to make it more personal because the first book was more kind of stories about other people, and she's like, I think you're ready to take on more autobiographical stuff. I was like, all right. So she's like, well, what's something you could relate to? And I thought about that for a couple weeks, and I thought, well, social awkwardness is something I can really easily relate to, and so that's the topic we decided to go after. Yeah.
How do you go after that? How do you social what's the substance you're getting at in the book?
Right. So there's two problems, right? One is the storytelling. And so what kind of stories are you going to tell about awkwardness? The second problem is what's the data, right? Yeah. So good news on both fronts. I'll go with the data first. Yeah. Psychologists don't study awkwardness. They don't call it that. But there's over 1,000 studies that are about social awkwardness, but it's called something jargony and different. Yeah, and the data is remarkably good.
What's it called?
Well, the broad autism phenotype is one thing that they'll call it. Which just doesn't have a good popular press ring to it. So we've called it other things, but that's part of the challenge, right? You have to take the jargon of your field, and you have to take things that are actually meaningful and important within a group of social scientists, and you have to find a way not to insult them or dumb down, right, the nuance of the data. But then you have to deliver it in a way that's appealing and intuitive and not confusing. Yeah. So, so the data's great. And they have great technology now, so they can tell through pupil tracking studies with lasers. They can actually watch where you look in a social situation with a great degree of accuracy. You can see awkward people walk into a social situation, watch them look at the sparkles, you know, up in the chandeliers, or the math problem over on the board, while everybody else is looking at the social situation taking place center stage.
Yeah.
And then what you see neurologically is you see that now that they've missed these early milliseconds of interaction where so much information has taken place, the part of their brain right here that processes social information holistically can't catch up. So they switch to another route over here, and when this part of your brain becomes active, when you get a lot of blood flow here, that's the part active when you're solving puzzles, math problems, science problems. So what they're doing is they're taking the pieces of the situation and they're trying to quickly aggregate that into something abstract. Like the tone of the room is positive, or the tone of the room is, you know, somber.
Yeah.
Whereas everyone else has walked in and said, "Oh yeah, this is a positive tone in this room."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you learning as you're studying awkwardness? Like, what is, without risk? Well, I mean, you could tell us. It's a small room. Like, what's the thesis of the book at the end of this? What are you discovering?
Yeah, I'll talk about two things maybe that might be relevant. So, one thing we talked about was lighting, actually.
Really?
Thank you.
That wasn't on brand.
Right on cue. Yeah. Yeah, point out the things that's supposed to be behind the scenes, right? So, one of the analogies we open up with in chapter 1, and this maps on really well to the data, is that most people see social life as a stage that's broadly illuminated. And they look center stage, because that's where the action is most likely to take place. And that means that they pick up cues and social information that's relevant, and they're keeping up with everything. If you're awkward, what happens? So imagine the house lights go down. Now it comes up for a second rendition, but it's a sharp spotlight. And it's maybe stage left. And so you would see whatever's in that spotlight with tremendous clarity and brilliance, but you would miss a lot of other stuff going on that everyone else is picking up on. And that's related to the second interesting thing. This is the awesome part of the book, is that there's a strong correlation between giftedness and social awkwardness. And so the kind of, with gifted kids, you see this, what they call rage to master. I love that term, actually, because it's this idea that you're so passionate about something and so hungry to master something that you have this drive within you that's supernatural. And you have tremendous focus, and you want to get tremendous clarity about it and know every single detail about it. But that's exactly what you see with awkward kids, too. And so these two traits combine, oddly enough, social awkwardness and that spotlighted focus, along with the power of somebody's intellect and giftedness to create potential that's actually far greater than what you'd have if you didn't have those two traits co-occur together.
So, and I don't know if this is part of the book or not, or part of the research. If you see somebody you really care about, and they fall into an incredibly awkward situation, is there anything you can do to help there? Is there any way to step into that, or do you just let it breathe in its awkwardness?
Yeah, you just gotta let it. You just gotta let it be awkward, you know, and marinate a little bit. If they're trying to fix it and they're just making it worse, you know, then sometimes you can be like, "Hey, brother, it's getting worse," you know. But no. So here's the funny thing about awkward moments, and the storytelling. This was really interesting.
Yeah, we gotta go.
Is that the I actually wrote the stories in this with musical notation. Because there's a real rhythm to awkward moments. So social life progresses in quarter notes, right? And there's social graces and there's social expectations, and this exchange happens at a rhythm. An awkward moment comes along, it's like there's this huge crescendo and everything goes to like 64th notes all of a sudden, and the pace just really speeds up, right? But what happens then neurologically and psychologically is you're just pretty confused, right? Because your physiology's totally ramped up. You don't have any specific cognition. You just know like things have gone really badly, you know. And now you're scrambling to figure out how exactly did it go bad and how can I fix it. But you're in a really bad state to fix it, because you're so panicked. You're in this fight or flight, you know, kind of thing. So yeah, you just gotta let it go, you know. And one of the best things people can do if they can is to laugh about it, you know, and be like, well, that was awkward, you know. One of the beauties now, I think, is that awkwardness has become almost kind of cool. Yeah. Not quite, but almost, you know. There's a lot of reasons I think that happened, but even if you look at the popular media, right? There's some of our most popular shows are about awkwardness. We actually relish in it, and the nerd community actually has really thrived as well, right? And so nerd culture is just, who thought that would be a thing? And people can kind of celebrate their strange esoteric interests, what used to be strange esoteric interests. Comic-Con's one of the great examples, right? And find a common community either in person or online.
Yeah. So let's end on a story. And this kind of gets, I was telling Leticia, my girlfriend, about how much of an impression you had made on me when you gave that 1 2-hour talk. And she's like, well, what did he talk about? I was like, I don't remember, other than a dog and like a salad bar. And I really don't remember the story, but I remember it was so painfully awkward.
I lived it. Yeah, right.
I'm hoping you can share that story and then we'll wrap up. Whatever that was.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about.
I do, unfortunately, yeah. All right, so I'll tell the story. But before I tell it, I just want to say real quick, and I'll embarrass you real quick. So when you teach something, your hope is that your student eclipses you, right? That's always your goal as a teacher. Dan has certainly done that. So I'm so proud of you. I'm not gonna get emotional, but all the things you've done, like, just really proud of you, man. And it's great what's being accomplished here and the people you brought together. Your ability to create fellowship is just unparalleled. So appreciate you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'll embarrass myself. So when I was a freshman at the University of Colorado, I'd been a real underachiever in high school, so I thought I got to pull my act together. I got to be successful, and I didn't know how to do that. So I thought, well, successful people seem to wake up early. It's a start, right? So I got up early, and so I'd go eat breakfast at 7:30. There's really no one in there, and I'd sit on the east side there in China-Arapahoe Hall and and eat my pancakes. That was my big plan, to be successful. So now there's one other person I ate breakfast at early, and so she sat on the west side windows, on the opposite side, and she was just this heavenly vision, and kind of light cascaded in there in such a way, it was like this lighting and, yeah, so I'm like 18, I'm just like, oh man, I gotta, but I'm awkward, right, so, so she's kind of weird too, but so she goes up to the salad bar every day, which I'm like, why do you eat salad? It's 7:45 in the morning, but like, whatever, it's a whole physical attractiveness halo that people get. So, so I was like, well, maybe I should try some salad, So, I finally get the guts to go up there, and she's up there, and we're like on opposite sides of the sneeze guard, and so like my pancake took up my whole plate, so then I was like, putting salad on top of my pancakes. Like these like garbanzo beans rolling off the plate. Yeah, it was bad. So, but I kept getting salad, because I'm like, oh, just, so for a couple days I did this. And, yeah, no talking, just. So, finally, I turned back. It's like, I think 3rd, 4th day I did this, and I felt this tug on my sleeve. And she had these kind of puka shells on her, so a little jangle, and it was her, And she said, why don't you bring your pancakes over here? I said, okay. So I went sat over there, and we started having breakfast together. So I'm like, wow, this is great, man. You know, this is really great. And then, you know, I got the guts up to, I think, ask her to a dinner or something. And eventually we miraculously started dating. I don't know how that happened, but we started dating. It was good, you know. In fact, we had the us talk. You know, about 5-6 weeks we had the us talk, and so now we're boyfriend girlfriend. And she follows that right up with, well, would you like to meet my parents then? Sure. Yeah, you gotta say yes to that, right? But when you're 18, you kind of don't want to, you know. So now, to make matters more complicated, her father was a former offensive lineman in the NFL.
Really?
No joke. Yeah. So yeah, I went out there to Cherry Creek. You know where they lived. They lived in some really fancy home up on some hill. I wore a sport coat because that's what you do at dinner at the place, I guess. And so I got there, walked up this kind of long stairway to the door, and super nervous and really nervous about the shake, because you're going to get the dad shake, you know, where they like reach out and here's what they do is they grab you by the fingers and they just crush you, you know. And my palms are getting sweaty. And so Mr. Olson opens the door, and he's enormous. You know? I think just as muscular and powerful as his days in the NFL, and totally crushes my hand with a dad handshake. And then her mom comes over, and she's real gregarious, gives me a big hug, super friendly, just really lovely people, you know. And then my girlfriends, you know, they're kind of taking it all in, really happy this is all happening. Now, it's a big, long foyer, entryway, that was marble floor, and I heard this galloping in the distance, and around the corner comes this enormous dog. I never before nor since have I seen a dog of this size, and just it's like a tiny pony, you know? And just so massive that like when he tries to stop himself, he like crashes into the wall, you know? And he squares right up on me. And 2 years old at the time, so about 14, you know, years old, human years, so a little worked up. Yeah. So he starts like just galloping, you know, like down the marble foyer, and I'm just like, not picking up on the social cue, right? So the dog mounts me, and but the dog was so massive it didn't mount me like a regular dog. It mounted me actually kind of like around my shoulders, so like the dog's just like dry humping me, like, and you know, and like I didn't know what to do, so I was just like, yeah, you know? And like Mr. Olson came over and like kicked the dog off of me, you know? It was very traumatic, you know. So, so that didn't go well. But I'll close this up because you know. But there was a lot of other awkward things that happened. But I'll just say one more thing. So, I did recover a little bit, so I did get my feet back underneath me, and they're very funny people, very funny family. That's part of the reason I was attracted to my girlfriend. She's very funny. And so at dinner, we're sitting there at this square table. It's the parents, girlfriend across, and we're having a good time, and we're all laughing, ha ha ha, whatever, you know. And it's like one of those things, like the laughter's building, like everything everybody says, like is funnier than the next, and kind of improv, you know. And I'm in there, and I'm kind of rolling, so I'm like, yeah, this is great, you know, like I'm fitting in. Yeah. And her mom says something super funny, so I go to give her like the "Hey, you're funny" pat on the, and she just like rotated at the last second. So it's just plain as day, like, yeah. And then we broke up like the next week, but Yeah. So that was the story I told.
That was the story, yeah.
And then I probably cried right after that. So. Yeah.
Well, Ty, I don't think we've ever come close to laughing this hard in a fireside. Thank you, Ty.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, man. Yeah.